Welcome, everybody, to this new experimental version 1.0 of the Three Whiskey Happy Hour on Substack. I believe this is the first time we are recording live on the Substack platform rather than using entities hosted and created by the People's Republic of China. So, advances every day. It's a great way to start out the new year. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Steve Hayward. Steve, where are you? What are you doing? What's on that misbegotten T-shirt you call clothing?
It's a Reagan Library T-shirt, I'll have you know.
You've
just disgraced yourself as usual. Okay, good.
And Lucretia, where are you? And what is that lovely sweatshirt you're wearing to open the new year?
Plato's Cave Search and Rescue Team.
That's pretty cool.
I'm not a big person on wearing shirts and things that say things or advertise things, but this one was so cool I had to make an exception.
Now, Lucretia, that sweatshirt's open to so many different interpretations. I mean, would you say that John Rawls is the head of the search and rescue team?
Oh my God!
In a million years, I would never say that.
I was about to say, John, that the esotericism of that T-shirt is obviously lost on you because you're going to be the first person to be rescued by it, and you just proved why it's necessary.
What a great opening to the year! And listeners and those who've joined us live, and I see they're growing and growing already. The insults pour in on Steve not fitting into the into the mobile version of the Substack, which requires you to look at it vertically rather horizontally. Very good, Mr. Fennel. I love it. Keep him coming.
He's the one to talk. Never mind. Okay.
We decided to spend the very first episode of the 250th year of the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence by talking about the American regime, if that's what you want to call it, the Declaration of Independence, the Revolution, where it sits within this broader debate we are having right now in the worlds of political theory and constitutional law and everyday politics about whether we are in a post-liberal age. So I thought this would be a great way as the host for this first episode to kick off is it sesquicentennial year?
It's semi-quincentennial. It's semi-quincentennial. It rolls right off the tongue. Easy.
Yeah, I got it wrong. All I know is that the Washington Monument on July 1st had a great display on it to kick off the 250th. So, Steve was just frozen, drinking, making himself larger and not fitting in that little box. So now he's unfrozen. So let's start off by asking first, and I think we'll start with Lucretia. What is, in your mind, liberalism, and why is it under attack now?
Well, let me start with the first one. Liberalism, in the most basic sense, actually means liberated from politics. That's what you are liberated when you are liberal. That's what traditional classical liberalism means in the most fundamental sense. And it means that in a way that it's not really all that important, that classical understanding of it, except that when you say liberated from politics, it means that politics, that you have a sphere of autonomy, a sphere of privacy, personal autonomy into which the government does not and should not intrude. That's really what we see when we look at Locke, at classical liberalism. So if we start with that idea, our founders are considered classical liberals in the sense that they believed that government should be, in the first place, proscriptive, not prescriptive, as the classicals would have had it, right? Meaning that laws are in place to prevent you from doing things that you shouldn't do rather than to guide you to do those things that you should do. I know Steve's looking at either he's stuck or he's thinking I'm being oversimplifying here, but I think it's important to keep it kind of simple. And so our founding fathers' classical liberalism builds on the basic notion of natural rights. Natural rights being those things that human beings possess prior to, antecedent to any society, social structure, or government. And government then exists, it's instituted for the sole purpose of protecting those natural rights, which unfortunately are insecure. They're not non-existent absent government, but they're insecure absent government. And so that leads to all of the things that we find in our wonderful Declaration of Independence, the claim of the self-evident truth of human equality. That's how we know we have natural rights, because no human being is born so superior to any other that he or she's the ruler over others. That means we are all our own rulers. That means we have the natural right to life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, and that government is instituted again just for the purpose of securing those rights. And it is that understanding which we think of as classical liberalism, because it is, in fact, a recognition that government isn't the end all and be all. Right?
Steve,
is that fair, Steve?
Steve, is that
Well, yeah, it is.
Let me just follow up with Steve. That definition is it so capacious that it would conclude Justice Kennedy's decision in Obergefell upholding gay marriage as much as it would uphold Richard Epstein's utter defense to the limits of property rights?
The answer is no to the first, and probably yes to the second. No to the first, because the problem with Justice Kennedy, better stated in the famous Mystery of the Universe clause, right? Which was what? Was that in Casey? What case was that in? One of the other.
Yeah, that's not Obergefell. But Obergefell is the culmination, I think, of
exactly.
this idea.
The Universe clause, it says, what is it? Something like every individual gets to define their own theory of the meaning of the universe. It's just ridiculous. Yes. And so, in other words, rights become detached from nature, which is an important point. I thought for a minute, Lucretia, your first sentence threw me, and then you recovered. I thought at first you said liberalism is what do you say? The individual's detached from politics? And I thought, oh my goodness.
No. Yes, I get. I
don't
think I said it like that. But
liberated from politics.
Liberated from politics.
Liberated. That's it. Liberated from politics. I thought you were about to go full Carl Schmitt on us with that opening, which we'll come back to. No. But I do it a little simpler, John, which is what we call classical liberalism. Although it's not really classical, we can say in some ways. Not if you think the classics of antiquity, but it's lock and mill, right? So appreciate a few points. I say it's a government by consent, individual natural rights, property. And then also, democracy, although that's gotten very sloppy, but, he was big for parliamentary supremacy, which was representation, right? And then John Stuart Mill is what? He's the tribune of radical individualism. Everybody can pursue their own self-chosen ends, with the only limit being you harm somebody else, right? So then we talk about now the big hot new thing is post-liberalism. And I'm sort of interested that this is having such a moment, because most of the arguments being made are not brand new. They've been around a long time, and they've come from both the left and the right. The left really forever, because they hated Locke. That's Karl Marx hated Locke, right? And the progressives hated Locke. And some conservatives, starting with Burke, hated Locke, right? Burke said Locke's second treatise was, and I think the quote is, the worst book ever written. But what Burke had against it wasn't so much natural rights and so forth, although Burke's problematic. He didn't like the right to revolution as it's explained in Lockean terms. He thought that doctrine of natural rights was an invitation to revolution. And there are people as early as, say, the French thinker Joseph de Maistre, who said that Locke should be implicated as the real cause of the French Revolution, not Rousseau, which is the way I think that we do, right? I completely agree with you, Lucretia, that that's wrong. I'm just saying that this is an old argument from the right. And then there's more, I think, more interesting versions. Like I went and dusted off for the first time in 30 years Robert Nisbet's Quest for Community, book for the 50s, where let's remember that what the liberals have been saying for a while, going back to at least Lewis Hartz, is we've lost community. This individualism is terrible. We've lost community and belongingness and togetherness. And I think I've used this once before, but it's a long time ago. Lucretia will remember our great late friend John Weddergreen, who said communitarianism is just a chicken shit word for socialism, which I've always liked. I think it's absolutely right. I'll stop there. We can go through particular points of all this as we go, but that's liberalism. It's not clear to me exactly what post-liberalism means, although there's a few people we can grab a hold of, including our great friend Adrian Vermeule.
Let's move on then. Uh, and I think both of you agree that the Declaration of Independence, again, which we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of this year, is the expression of classical liberalism, maybe one of the finest expressions of classical liberalism, very much inspired by John Locke, and under attack these days from both the left and the right. And we've talked a lot, I think, on the podcast about the attack from the left through the who I think is which is symbolized by the 1619 Project and the idea that the founding was aimed really to preserve slavery. I just read or listened to Gordon Wood, another of my favorites, but not yours, say that the 1619 Project is just not history. It's more like political propaganda. But it's also under attack now. The founding is under attack from the right, from post-liberals. And so let me ask you both. I'll try my own definition of post-liberalism, ask you what you think of it, post-liberalism is, and then most importantly, your responses when we come back after this ad break, hopefully for the McRib.
Right. I have got a great quote for you from Patrick Deneen when we come back. Anyway, go ahead.
So ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. I hope the last commercial forced everyone to experience pangs of hunger and to rush out to McDonald's, use your gift cards on the app, and the automated robotic kiosks to order your preformed spam fillet. I love it. Makes me hungry just thinking about it. So looking at the works of Patrick Deneen, who's a professor at Notre Dame, and Adrian Vermeule, a good friend of mine who's a professor at Harvard Law School, and their writings, which are advance this idea of a common good conservatism in Deneen's case, or a common good constitutionalism in Vermeule's case, they both argue that the classical liberalism that both of you have just described has failed. It has failed, I think, in both of their views by destroying the institutions and communities around which traditional society was formed. That the liberalism's quest to unleash individual autonomy has resulted in the decline of the family, decline in religion, upswings in drug use, in aimlessness, in welfare, and that liberalism, because it has no superior moral values that people should follow. As Lucretia put it, it doesn't have a system to make you do things. It only tries to impose a negative liberty. The post-liberals say that this lack of a morality has led to the collapse of our society. And they would argue that we have to return to a understanding of politics or understanding of constitutional law that allows for the imposition, or they would say, imposition sounds too hard, promotion of positive morality in the citizenry. I think that's I think
That's
that
fair.
I'm trying to be fair. I'm not being trying to be.
I think
Sure.
it's fair, John.
So,
Well-
Lucretia, let's start with. Steve has a quote he wants to read.
Well,
It's standing in between.
Read your quote, but yes.
Well, standing
I do.
between Steve and a quote is like someone standing between me and a cheesesteak
an
from
analogy.
Philadelphia. Yeah, don't get in the way. Just
I'm
don't
not-
get in the way.
no, this will be an analogy-free segment at least. Well, first of all, two quick things. One is I think we ought to put it in this restate how you open, John. At the bicentennial in 1976, there was this one little leftist effort called the People's Bicentennial Commission to trash the founding, and it was Jeremy Rifkin and a bunch of no names, and they got some attention, but not much. This year, we're going to see a ton of it from the left. The 1619 Project you mentioned, but then at the same time, we're going to see challenges to the Declaration from the right. And so, for example, we mentioned Deneen. I came across this quote from Deneen from a speech he gave recently where he said, I'll do some quotes here, "We don't need a return to the founding." He said that conservatives are supporting a philosophy of profligacy and hubris, and the founding is, another quote here, "a highly tendentious and abstract understanding of America that rests on libertarian wish casting about the founding." So we're going to hear that from the right saying, we shouldn't be looking back for help to the founding and all the rest of that. Now, common good. I've got a lot of points, but I'll just make this one and turn it over to Lucretia. It is true that common good under liberalism is said to represent merely the sum total of individual preferences. And that or the sum of political accommodations we make through the bargaining of our legislative process. And I think that's mistaken. I think the founders did have an idea of the common good,
Absolutely.
and that's what can be and should be recovered. And I'll stop there. I've got a lot more observations, but that's my opener.
So
Appreciate.
I want to sort of take it back and blame Steve a little bit from his opening for the problem. First of all, John Stuart Mill has nothing to do with what our founders' understanding of classical liberalism was. And
I
the
agree with that.
idea that those Europeans, Kant, Mill, all of those people have messed up modern people's way of thinking. That's problematic. But the real problem, John gave I thought, an excellent sort of a summary of common good constitutionalism, common good whatever. Those things are just silly failures to understand what's really happened here in America. The founders had classical liberalism, which did indeed put the emphasis on the individual, but there's nothing in the framers in the framers' thought, even in the things that they put together, that dismisses the idea that virtue and a virtuous citizenry is necessary. The reason we have lost, for instance, communities, those associations that Tocqueville talked about, so brilliantly, and how they were in many ways the genius of America. The reason isn't because of some emphasis on individualism in the framers. It's because of progressivism. It's because of progressivism that says, first of all, there are no such things as natural rights. Human beings are not equal, but that we don't want voluntary associations. We want everything done by the government. And when you've got, you take away the allegiance people have to churches, to their communities, to their neighborhoods, because you replace them with governmental programs. You replace them with the idea that government doesn't need to be watched against, it doesn't need to be guarded against. It's a good thing. Think about the stupid Tangi's stupid comment in one of the last things that came out. We don't want this to happen. We want PhDs making our decisions in the government. We want elites making decisions in the government. I know a lot of PhDs. I am one. You don't want us making decisions. Anyway, that's another story. The idea that smart people will be public spirited and are much more, I guess you could say, they're preferable to those community associations. That's all because of progressivism. That is an aberration from the founders. It is not a necessity from the founders. And it took decades of progressivism to destroy the ideas that the founders put out there. It wasn't that they were in and of themselves inherently destructible. It was a massive and quite successful effort on the part of progressivists to destroy the American founding. And that is the thing we need to be talking about every single day in 2026.
So, as one way to understand what you're saying, Lucretia, is that the common good constitutionalism or post-liberal idea is an overreaction to the perversion of liberalism that occurred during the progressive era. So, progressive era attacks the founding, as you say. They have quite a bit of success for about 60 years, 70 years. It starts to recede, I think, in the 80s, but it's made a comeback under Obama. But the reaction is of post-liberals is we need another American Revolution. Right? We need to overthrow, whereas you could just say, I think Lucretia's point maybe is, why isn't the proper response just to return to the founding principles of our revolution and constitution? You don't need to have a wholly new revolution and overthrow the liberal regime in America because we've gone off course. Is that fair? And then, Steve, what do you think?
I'll respond quickly, Steve,
Yeah.
and then let you,
Yeah.
because I'm sure you have a lot to say about what I said. I don't even know if it's an overreaction. It's just a failure to understand the importance of ideas here. Steve had a great line he wrote in, and we had an email chain going back and forth between the three of us. And one of the things he said is these common good constitutionalists have this idea that maybe they can replace whatever with a kind of Catholicism, and he said they should understand it's going to be Protestantism if we ever get common good something. I'm actually much more concerned that we get Islamism. If you want collectivism, if you want community, if you want all of those things, the most powerful ideals out there right now, obviously, if you've been watching the horror that is New York City in the last 2 days, we don't have to worry about Catholics taking over this country, despite what Candace Owen thinks. We have to worry about Islam. And I believe that in my heart of hearts, because to the extent that we have destroyed a belief in any kind of supreme being or something greater than themselves, it has left many people out there desperate in the search for meaning. And Islam is a very powerful, ugly, but compelling thing to turn to. That's why you see all these dumb twits putting on their hijab, the redheads. I saw one of the things that the 2026 things we need to do in 2026. We need to ban gingers from becoming Islam. Sorry, go ahead. I'm done, Steve.
I personally am not really terribly worried about Islam becoming the state religion of the United States. But Steve, go ahead.
Well, maybe certain local communities it might, but well, first of all, I think I have a book title to suggest to Lucretia, which is "Dumb Twits and Their Dumb Tweets." I think that's a nice ring to it. But
it doesn't work anymore because now they're exes.
Okay. All my exes. We'll figure something out there. There's a country song to be had for that. Now, first of all, John, I am for a counter revolution if it involves toppling Woodrow Wilson statues everywhere. But anyway,
but that's not what they want.
Yeah, I know. So first of all, I do think I'm not sure if you meant to imply it or not. I don't think, say, Adrian Vermeule or even Patrick Deneen are calling for theocracy. I mean, the word they use is integralism, and I'm not sure, is it actually an ism like environmentalism? Not really. What it means is we should integrate, they think, and because they're Catholics, or of Catholic social teaching, which has always been very political, going back to, the common good and social justice as was understood rightly by the Catholic thinkers 1,000 years ago. Okay, I get all that, and have some sympathy with the concepts. The problem is it's built on a distortion. I'll restate what Lucretia was saying and do it this way. Some of the critiques made of liberalism is that, well, it ignores virtue. Virtue has either disappeared or been fully privatized, in which case it's not really public virtue at all. That's Alistair McIntyre's attack on liberalism, for example. I've already mentioned the problem of the common good in liberalism being reduced to just the sum total of individual preferences. In other words, there is no real concept to argue about what is the best regime, right? It's, whichever way our individual choices and political compromises take us to. And that's also attacked from the left as well. And then rootless individualism. That was the complaint of people like, Russell Kirk and others. So my problem is, all right, what is post-liberalism? What does it look like? What are the doctrines? What are the institutions? There, it's beyond vague. This is just sort of a complaint. And I'll say lastly that all those complaints about the lack of virtue, that there's no view of the common good implied or contained in the American founding or our documents, seems to me completely wrong. And there, I just refer listeners to what I think is the classic work of the last couple of decades, and it's Tom West's book on the founding, whose title is escaping me right now. I'll try and find it for the show notes. But he's written a very comprehensive treatment about why virtue, the common good, rightly understood by the classics, and the place of the individual and our social connections was very richly contained in the American founding. And we deliberately rubbished that. In part, sorry, Lucretia, I'll just defend myself briefly. The reason I mentioned Mill is not to associate him with the founders, but he is a key turning point in defending what happened to the liberal tradition in the 20th century. And so today, if, college campuses, to the extent they even try, they start with Mill's On Liberty as the first text of how to understand liberalism and the liberal tradition. And we love his free expression ideas mostly, but that is also a deflection that sets the stage for the progressives. I'd put it that way.
So I was wandering around because I was looking for that book of West's. But it's something like, well, there's one book, Vindicating the Founders, as one version, and then there's another one.
Steve's up. I want to say, so Tom West's teacher, my teacher, Steve's teacher, Harry Jaffa. I'll probably get it wrong, Steve, so help me out with the quote. But it was our founders' government limited the ends of government. It did not limit the ends of man. But when we talk about the ends of man, it is not that sort of what would it be? Just this anything goes kind of idea. The stupid thing said by Kennedy, your view of the universe. No, the ends of man are still available to us through studying philosophy, through studying reason, through studying nature. We discover what it is that makes man happy. And, Jaffa's best example of the proof of that is that the Declaration claims or makes the claim that when we exercise our absolute natural right to revolution, by the way, I don't want that to slip by. When we exercise that and we institute new government, we do it according to what? Our safety and happiness. The alpha and omega of human life, safety and happiness. It's a purely Aristotelian statement. It's not just our safety. It's not just a sort of Hobbesian, we're going to make sure that we're not, constantly in fear of awful, horrible, violent death. No, it's our happiness. But happiness is not idiosyncratic. It is defined by man's nature and by nature's God. And the last thing I'll say about this, Steve, is the reason that we don't want to substitute some kind of Catholic integralism or any of those other things. You're right that 1,000 years ago, Catholic social justice had some really wonderful things to say. That was in the days of theocracies and, God, divine right of kings and monarchies. What our founding did was say, we're going to separate those things. They can be teachable moments and all of those other things, but they're not going to be part of our public policy. That we are not going to turn to Catholicism or Episcopalianism or.
Okay. We got to take a break before you lift up religion, Lucretia. So let's just pause there. Let me ask you all to address this next question when we come back, which is, I take the post-liberals to be saying, so you make the appeal, as Lucretia just did, to the founders and their views. Steve just pulled out Tom West, whose book is called Vindicating the Founders. Well, post-liberals, their argument is, suppose the founders are wrong. I mean, you're just appealing to them as a source of authority doesn't actually inform us about whether they're right or wrong. And I think to put the best face on the post-liberals, they are just saying we should return to classical views of politics, to Aristotelian views of mixed regimes, and as Steve said, trying to the polis, the city, molding people into a vision where they follow substantive virtue. So let me leave you guys with those thoughts, those questions, and then we'll address them when we come back from this next break. I'm sure McDonald's has now dropped us as an advertiser after my praise of it as spam related. So I'm guessing that this will next be some kind of commercial for guns or ammunition. And when we come back. Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Should we keep going, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Is there
going.
Something you want to? Okay.
Well, I'm going to mention the book title, the full book title.
Okay.
I want to get that in. So.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Again, we're on the first episode of the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour of 2026, where we thought we'd kick off the new year and celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence by trying to address some of the deeper issues rather than current events, which is our want, and talk about this movement of post-liberalism and its criticism of the founding. And so, Steve, why don't you pick us up? I think right before the break, I asked a series of questions in reaction to Lucretia's praise, which I share, of the founders, but the post-liberals say, but the founders were wrong. Look at the terrible social statistics that you can look at in our society right now, the rise of illegitimacy, the decline of families, lack of religious belief, growing levels of addiction and welfare, people not working. They claim this is all a result of untrammeled personal autonomy and personal decisions unaffected by government, and they call for a return to classical understandings of the purpose of government.
Well, so first of all, we were going fast. Let me get the actual book titles down right. The West book I'm talking about is, I can show it to viewers here, is called The Political Theory of the American Founding, subtitle, Natural Rights, Public Policy, and the Moral Conditions of Freedom. I think this book is the comprehensive reputation. It was written 10 years ago of a lot of the post-liberalism we hear now. His earlier book you mentioned, John, this is like 20 years ago, called Vindicating the Founders. Subtitle here is Race, Sex, Class, and the Justice in the Origins of America. This was a pre-refutation of the 1619 Project and all of its cognates. Both I highly recommend. Rush Limbaugh read this book and couldn't shut up about it on his radio show when it came out back around 2000, I think it was. Let me pick up three things here. And by the way, listeners, you should know that we're going to be periodically revisiting how this debate over the Declaration unfolds as we approach July 4th. So I think several of these will want to actually stop and spend, half an episode or more. And one of them concerns happiness. What is meant by the pursuit of happiness? And maybe, we'll do
on which we're going to have a conference at the
Exactly.
University of Texas at Austin this spring. Yep.
I was just about to mention that we're going to do a conference, and we may get, multiple shows out of the content of that. Second, religion. I think, Lucretia, I think you will agree that your summary of that was maybe too summarized in this sense. Again, we're going to need a whole episode that goes through the so-called separation of church and state in some order. But I mean, it's a short placeholder. You remember John Adams' famous comment that, how's it go? The Constitution of America is made for a religious people, and it's not fit for any other kind. And think of
George Washington also,
and George Washington, right? And so that should be laid out, I think, in patient detail. The third one, though, is so, John, your question to get directly to it. The criticism of post-liberals, but not just post-liberals, is that one way it's put is that modern natural right, modern liberal tradition lowers the sights. It's built on the low but solid ground of modernity.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the famous phrases. And Leo Strauss had, I think, the best phrase of all for some of this. He said, Lockean liberalism, because it's a materialist. Here I'm going to attack you, John, because you're a defender of materialism. He said the problem with materialism and what a simpler mind like Russell Kirk would say is rootless individualism is it would generate, and his phrase was, the joyless quest for joy. I think that's a great phrase, and I think that's
I'm sorry, but the quest for joy is not joyless. I enjoy it all the time. Who are these idiots? Well, these are philosophy professors. Of course they have no fun.
Yeah, but you see, you look at, one way you could go after this is, what do we hear about these days? Oh, we're so polarized. Everybody's mad. Everybody's angry and grumpy. And by the way, I think that is on purpose by progressives. They like that because it allows more opportunities for the government to intervene in our lives. So that's a feature, not a bug for them. So they complain about polarization. It's terrible. So they're really saying is, if we're polarized, we're going to manage your lives. And if we're not polarized, it's because you agree with us. It's heads I win, tails you lose. That's how this argument works. But I do think there is something about whether it's Strauss or anybody else, or even some of the more sensible liberals like Wilson Carey McWilliams, who is Pat Deneen's teacher at Rutgers, they're saying there's something unsatisfying about liberalism. And, the complaint about materialism has been around a long time in various vulgar and simplistic ways.
Can I just interrupt just for a second? So Deneen went to Rutgers, so he had to spend 4 years in Camden and Trenton. So as a Philadelphian, I now understand why he wants to destroy civilization as we know it and move to a more primitive society without technology or medicine.
Right?
Of course. Anyone who has to live in New Jersey for that long would have such a pessimistic view of me. Okay, sorry to interrupt, Steve. Go ahead.
I'm done.
That
Okay,
completes the
so
picture for me.
answering your question in the simplest way, I would ask Deneen, or I actually did ask Vermeulen, and he had no answer for me other than some sort of appeal to bureaucratic uh, Vatican sort of bureaucracy. That's a long story we don't have time for here. But here's the real point: were the
Oh, can I
founders
just pause
wrong?
there and just put the setting for people? We'll, I'm sure, talk about this later. But last year, Lucretia, Steve, and I went to the University of Milan with Adrian Vermeulen, and we had a panel sponsored by a great friend of ours, what do you call Alessandro? I don't know if he wants to Mangia, who's a professor of political theory at the University of Milan, Cattolica, their great university in Milan. And I just want the listeners to imagine in their minds uh, what it was like for Lucretia and Adrian to have cocktails sitting next to each other. It was, I wish I had a video. I would have TikToked it immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Or put it on Substack. But we did have that event, and we'll talk about it, I guess, as we talk about
It was
these
epic.
issues throughout the year. It was an epic confrontation. But Lucretia, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. So
It's
he
quite all
responded
right,
he responded by praise of the administrative state.
Yes,
Yes.
he's right.
If
Yep.
I remember the exchange,
Yep.
you criticized him, and I believe Adrian criticized you for your attachment to outdated 18th century ideas of natural law, which he agrees are nonsense on stilts, to use the famous Bentham phrase. And then he said, if we that the administrative state, right, the agencies can be relied upon to guide us and make the right choices.
Well, and I think, John, that you're correct. I do want to go back to the earlier point, but I want to say that I think that the way you just framed that, is the administrative state properly constituted the only answer to our societal and political ills? And I see a lot of good people out there kind of writing that, we've got to embrace the administrative state. We just got to do it right. We've got to embrace government regulation and those sorts of things. So I agree that that's a really important point. I want to make it much simpler for a moment. And I want to say, okay, Adrian, okay, any of you other people, tell me what it is about the founders' view of human nature that you think they got wrong. Now, the first and most important point about that is that the human nature that the founders described and then used as the basis for all of their political theories, they believed it was permanent, that human nature did not change. It did not change, and because it does not change, we may never understand it fully, but our quest should be first and foremost to understand nature, human nature, our place in the world, all of those nice things that philosophy does, and especially political philosophy. But if it doesn't change, then our quest is to know it. What is most important about our current situation is across the spectrum, with very few people in the middle getting it right, only getting it right, is that there is no such thing as human nature, and that human nature is malleable and it can be made into anything you want it to be. That's, of course, Marxism and communism, but it also seems to be, to some extent, these people on the right who want to deny that there's a fixed and unchanging human nature with which we must take account and take into account in order to form a political society that's good. Now, you could argue, I think, that the political society we formed, maybe it wasn't so great. But you have to start by saying either yes or no. The founders were right that there's a permanent, unchanging human nature that we can know. And then you can argue whether or not their political system they put together is consistent with that. If we believe Abraham Lincoln, there's none of these problems that Deneen or Vermeulen ever. He believes just the opposite, that the materialism built into our political system, the protection for natural rights, for property, the belief that human beings should do everything they can to maximize their own individual talents and propensities. All of those things, according to Jefferson, gave us the best and freest country, the best regime in the history of the world. I don't see these people actually taking up Lincoln's view of the matter in the same way I don't see him.
Let me throw this over to Steve too, but I think they actually share some of the views you set out. I think they like the views set out in the Federalist Papers would think of man as fallen. Yeah, would think that man is not perfectible. I don't. Maybe I'm misreading them, but I don't think the post-liberals are like the Marxists in that they think human nature is malleable. Don't they actually? I mean, if they're Aristotelians, aren't they really Aristotelians? And if they are, then don't they, right, think that human nature is unchanging too, but that society has to be more interventionist to stop people from, right,
So
doing
that's the
bad
second
things,
part.
harming themselves, right? And that's also in the Federalist Papers, although the government they designed is not as strongly interventionist. But go ahead, Steve, sir.
Well, can I introduce a new vector in all this? Because so let's remember that Adrian Vermeule directly and openly in his book on common good constitutionalism saying, "I'm inspired by Carl Schmitt." And
Mhm.
now the left goes crazy, and some people on the right, our good friend Phil Magnus is on the warpath against people like Vermeule and people who cite Schmitt. And okay, Schmidt's
And
got a
J.D.
problematic
Vance.
background. Right, but here's the thing about Schmidt. It's not just him, but he's the one who put it most forcefully in the 30s when he briefly joined the Nazi Party, right? A big error in his part. But he said the problem with liberal democracy is it's weak. And it's inherently weak, and it will not be able to defend itself against challenges from, communism or fascism. That was early Schmidt, and I think that he is. I think there's a lot to be said for his critique, which is very dense and difficult. So you look out the world now, and what do you see in Europe? You talk about democracies unable to defend themselves. And increasingly, I think we're now seeing it in the last few weeks here in this country. Things like the welfare fraud in Minnesota, which may be a nationwide phenomenon, right? We're now starting to wake up to the possibility that welfare fraud and abuse is not a small amount of money. It's a huge amount of money that's really exploded in the last 10, 15 years beyond its previous dimensions. How come we're not able to fix this? How come that we've totally failed at something as big, not to mention our failing education systems, defending the border until Trump came along. You do down a long checklist of how our democracy is showing the same kind of weaknesses as European democracy. And so that's part of their critique is that, look, this, never mind for now the particular challenges about the neglect of virtue and the common good, but democracy itself is now a matter that's in doubt.
Okay,
Why,
well,
why are you shaking your head, Lucretia? You think
I no, no, not
uh,
that you said anything
okay,
you said was wrong. It's just so stupid. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. No,
again, it's
what is so
yeah, because
stupid
the
about
founding
it?
fathers built
Yes.
welfare
Yeah.
into the Constitution. They built in, come on. I mean, it. If you cannot separate the abomination that was progressivism and its incredible influence on our political situation. If you cannot do that, you don't deserve to talk about what the what kinds of solutions there are to our current problems. You can't talk about the problem with fraud if you don't recognize that um, our elites who govern us are incapable of doing anything out of the public interest. I mean, that's a stupid progressive idea. And again, if you don't think it's serious, look at Ketanji. And, the fact that she wasn't impeached for saying that is proof that we don't take that seriously enough. The idea that you've still got CNN and all those other people somehow trying to what would the word be, cover up for or dismiss or distract from the fraud going on by Somalis in Minnesota because, first of all, it might be racist. And second of all of the money's actually being funneled back to Democrats and Democrats have to, succeed no matter what. I mean, the idea that we could criticize the founders in the midst of all of these things that's going on just makes these people just seem stupid to me. They're not intelligent. They don't have answers to anything. They're looking at the wrong problems and offering the wrong solutions to the wrong problems.
Well,
And I don't know how else to say it. It drives me crazy.
let's take a break here. And before we do, also we got sent in a longish version of fan mail by our friend Phil Munoz at the University of Notre Dame, who, hearing that we were going to discuss this topic, sent us an essay he's drafting where he made the argument that another problem with post-liberalism is that they portray the founders as believe, and I think Lucretia is making this point in part, portray the founders as believing in untrammeled autonomy. And he actually says all of the rights are subject to the idea
Yeah.
of reasonable restrictions. That itself also comes from natural law. And that's his effort to save the founders from his common good constitutionalist friends. So let's talk about that when we come back after this break. Anything to?
No, no. We should go about another 5 minutes and then do our wrap up. Are we doing these? You got some bees for us and stuff, and yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we
I
are
don't. I
at
don't.
46 minutes, so we are right
Yeah.
on
Okay.
time.
So maybe
Yep.
7, 8 minutes of more, and then okay. So go ahead.
Okay, when we come back, one of the friends of the podcast, Phil Munoz, a professor at Notre Dame, taught like the three of you at the Claremont Graduate University, programmed like the three of you by Harry Jaffa et al. You all march in lockstep as far as I can tell. I just like to tag
Yeah.
along because you guys go to good restaurants. So Phil says, Phil's effort to, respond, and this, at least in this piece which he's working on, sent to us, is to argue that I guess his argument is that the common good constitutionalists or this post liberals make a straw man of liberalism, that they pretend that Justice Kennedy's,
Oh,
the right to pursue whatever you want to is the meaning of liberalism. The government should get out of the way. Uh, that's not really liberalism. His argument is the kind of liberalism that conservatives should defend is the ones, as you said, rooted in natural rights, and that view has a significant restriction, which is that you can exercise your natural rights so far as they are reasonable. Still, to me, that I don't hear you guys answering the question that I put to you, though, is that how can you tell that your view of natural rights is superior to the moral view that the common good people are selling? So you can, Lucretia said, the founders are right. Why are these people so stupid not agreeing with the founders? And they just say the founders are wrong. I think it's kind of interesting. They say they're wrong because of the consequences, right? Because of the statistics that we're seeing in society. What is your response to that, Phil? I mean, I would think they could say back to Phil, well, that's what we've been doing all these years. Liberalism, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, rights are subject to reasonable restrictions. They for many years and continue to restrict Second Amendment gun rights to reasonable restrictions. We're going to get a comment from Lucretia on that, I believe. But that still doesn't answer their fundamental attack, I think, which is why should we think the founders, even if Lucretia's right about describing why they thought what they thought and how they thought, but maybe they were just wrong.
Maybe.
Well,
Prove it.
Steve.
Go ahead,
Well,
Steve.
their view is look at all the social problems we have today. They would say that's an
Again, that's so
outpouring.
simplistic. They're not caused by the founders; they're caused by the progressives. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
well, first of all, Phil is the goat when it comes to understanding how religious liberty should be understood in American
Yes.
constitutionalism.
Although he's ultimately wrong about its judicial application, but
well, okay. Well, we'll have to have him back.
Because Phil believes that the courts ought not to recognize exceptions for religious groups from government regulation.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Are we back to the Smith versus employment division?
Yes. He's a big fan of Smith. He's the last existing fan of Smith versus.
Yeah. All right. Well,
but we will. I'm sure we'll have a whole podcast this year about.
Yeah, we should do that.
Religious liberty and the Supreme Court, and maybe we'll have Phil back.
I think
we should. In fact, actually, John, I just want to say this in case the listeners out there who contacted me on X, and we went back and forth because they were actually asking some really perspicacious questions about religious liberty and trying to understand what it is, which courts got us where we are, and so forth. So I think it would be wonderful for us to do that one of these days. Sorry, editorial comment there.
We could also have a reader's mailbag episode, which all the other podcasts seemed to have on this last week. I was so bored. See, I mean, I don't care what
John.
Well, I don't care what they think. I don't understand why we have to broadcast our views to them, but we are. So,
yeah,
Steve, go ahead.
Well, first of all, let me see if I can do this very briefly. It's important to understand. I know Phil understands it. It's important to understand that for the founders, the idea of natural rights in the classical liberal tradition and religious influence were reciprocal and mutual properties. In other words, you take, by the way, this is much on my mind right now for a reason I'll come to maybe. You think of George Washington's famous letter to the Hebrew congregation at Newport in 1794, whatever it was, when Washington's president. And he said, you now have the same natural rights as everybody else because it's your right of conscience. I'm paraphrasing badly. But he adds that so long as you or anybody else, he's really saying, demean themselves and respecting everybody else's rights, we're good. And that differs from, say, what did Britain have? They had the Toleration Act, right? The Toleration Act of 1788 says we're now going to tolerate nonconforming religions. We won't throw you in jail anymore for being an Anabaptist or whatever the heck they used to do in Britain. They still had religious tests for public office in Britain until well into the 19th century. So the point is, and now I do remember Washington's words, is it's now no longer that toleration is spoken of as though it's by one group of people allowing some other group of people to enjoy their natural rights, of religious liberty. So we've lost that sense of the reciprocal and mutual nature of religious liberty and our other civil liberties. Footnote here, read Jefferson's statute for religious freedom in Virginia, 1786, I think it was. Now, why that? This is all very much on my mind, and this is a brief diversion, but I'll just plant it here for now. In the last 10 days or so, or maybe last 2 weeks, I've noticed something from the Groyper right online. And, the followers of Nick Fuentes and stuff, they're saying Judeo-Christian tradition is a modern formulation. It's a post-World War II thing because of our response to the Holocaust. America is a Christian nation, full stop. And I just think this is wrong theologically, mistaken historically, but also being done in very bad faith. I can see where this is going, and it's really got me worried and really quite upset. I'll stop there. I have sequels to that, but I'll just mention that.
Yeah, I do too. Really quickly, I want to say I read something that Tucker Carlson wrote that somebody else had quoted, and it was that we should not. We what we need to do is blame Jews for the fact that we have OnlyFans, that we have young men doing nothing but porn. It's not Islam's fault. We should be embracing the moral strictures of Islam and recognize that there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values, that Islam and Christianity are actually much closer. It just scared me to death. But I'll leave that aside because it deserves much more conversation than we have time for now. I would go back for just a moment and say what you have to do actually, John, is look at what it is that human nature is. You do have to decide for yourself. And in a free society, those kinds of decisions deserve to be debated. They deserve to be openly debated. I would argue, John, that you, who claim not to believe in natural rights, come to the same conclusion as you and I almost always agree on outcomes on some of these things. I mean, certainly on the important things. And I
don't tell people that. Don't tell people that you're ruining my street cred.
There's a reason.
You're ruining my street cred.
And that's because even though you say you're not convinced, you're not, you didn't find our friend Phil's reasoning all that compelling, I don't know that you disagree with the outcome. And so part of what I'm trying to say, and I'm not doing a very good job of it, is even the outcomes themselves are an indication of whether or not the views of the founders were right. And what I would say the problem with these post-liberals is not that they're looking at outcomes that we have today and determining that they're bad. Most of the time I agree with that. They're putting the blame in the wrong place. Again, they're asking the wrong questions and thereby giving the wrong solutions. I believe if human beings go back to the question of what is human nature really? Do we have freedom of conscience? Is the human mind free, as Jefferson told us? If you start asking those questions and get below all of the nonsense, then I think you actually can move forward. Marxism looked at some of those questions, gave a very different answer, and that seems to be much more compelling in our modern day. I get the idea that we want to push back against welfare state or at least make the welfare state a more efficient thing, different things that post-liberalism wants to do. Those things I understand. I don't like the fact that young men would rather watch porn than actually have sex with women, which excuse me I don't mean to be crude, but that seems to be a major problem in our society today. I think all of those things are genuine problems. The question is, if you're going to find the solution, you have to ask the right questions. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So John asked one question we haven't tried to answer. So let me try and do it, and maybe it draws
What
us
was
to
the
the end of
question?
our.
Because I probably
Well,
forgot it.
the question was, how do you account for the decay that we've seen by all the social measures you think of, and doesn't that imply? I'm not sure you meant this, John, but doesn't that imply that the founding was defective? That's what a lot of the post-liberals say: is our founding
Yes.
was defective, right?
Mhm.
Look, I mean, I think there's a couple things to be said about it. One is, again, the founders, I think, were pretty clear on this, that our system of Republican government could not survive unless the people remain virtuous. However you want to understand that, that's a long subject, but they understood that, and I think this is
Lincoln did
overbroad.
too.
What's that?
And Lincoln did too.
Right. And this is overbroad, but a lot of our troubles can be traced to the decline of individual virtue and also institutional corruption. But the broader question it raises, which I'm not going to try to answer, but say this is the broader question is this gets back to the classical question. By this I mean the ancient Greeks who first thought about politics seriously, right? Is there any political system that can survive a long time? Can you point to any example of a political system that has not failed eventually? This brings up the people who say, are we following Rome, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire?
Oh, they got
Uh, and
1,000 years out of it. Not bad.
Well, okay, but the question is, our founders thought that they were building something that would last, the new order for the ages, right? And one question is, what is it about human nature, the defects, the selfishness of human nature, the defects and flaws of human nature, very much on the mind of the founders, that make it inevitable that even a well-constructed constitutional order is going to have its crises? We came through some of them before, but there's nothing guaranteed about all this. So it's one thing to have to fight off the left about this. It's dismaying right now that we have to fight off some of our friends on the right at the same time. I'll just conclude there. We can say a lot more about all that, but there's a broader question than just the particular. Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
Well, no, that brings us to a nice
going to disagree. Really quickly, I was just going to say Lincoln warned about exactly that. And he said, if we did not continue to venerate the founding, because it really, the whole idea of taking every single citizen through the arguments of the Federalists and so on is probably not, but we need to have a certain political religion which venerated the founding. And again, if we had never had progressivism, I know that it's silly to talk that way, but might we not be in a much better position if progressivism had not become the dominant ideology in our country? And could we not still be in a place where we had a citizenry who understood the principles of the Declaration, who understood that they needed to be virtuous? Let me just give a silly example. In places like San Francisco, they in California in general, cashless bail, making certain kinds of theft not really a crime at all. And then people were absolutely surprised that crime skyrocketed. Doesn't that teach us a little bit of something about human nature? And is that any different in 2026 than it was in 1787? And so I do think it's possible to have real understanding about human beings and what is necessary to push them in the right direction so that they can, in fact, be virtuous citizens, mostly self-governing. Okay, sure. When you have shoplifting is no longer illegal to essentially, you have people who will still not shoplift. How do you get those people? How do you get those people? And those are the questions that I know that people like Vermeil want to ask those questions, but they're not asking them in the right way. They're just saying it's all the founders' fault for its radical, what was it? The frigid individualism.
Well, no, that's Mondami, but okay.
Yeah, I know, but it's essentially they're saying the same thing.
Yeah. Okay,
right?
let's call it to a halt. We're at the hour mark, and we should allow people to get on with failing to meet their New Year's resolutions. So nobody's getting to the gym, I'm sure already. But let's close with our usual Babylon Bees from Lucretia.
Okay, most of my Babylon Bees are Somali related, so I'll try to pull a few others. I'll start with this one. Speaking of New Year's resolutions, Planet Fitness offering convenient new 2-week membership for New Year's.
That's good.
Waltz announces $8 billion grant to Somali company to investigate fraud. The funniest thing about that, though, is the stupid-ass Snopes got on there and said, oh, no, this isn't really true. This was false news put out by that satire Christian website, Babylon Bee. So Snopes actually called it a lie. God, those people. I'm gonna do a little editorializing here for just a moment. Change this a bit. The Babylon Bee. Nope, strike that. The 3 Whiskey Happy Hour would like to inform Tim Waltz that we are now a functioning daycare in Minnesota.
Right.
I know. Okay, last one. Man achieves American dream of working hard and paying taxes for 50 years so he can fund fraudulent Somali daycares.
Yeah.
Not funny.
Okay.
Right.
That's true. So always drink your whiskey neat and buy more books. And Steve, how is AI going to welcome in Happy New Year 2026?
Well, I'm going to depart from format just to give you my New Year's resolution. And to get revenge for you for the way you've gone after us in this episode. My New Year's resolution is to give up all forms of positivism, legal, logical, philosophical, the whole bit. And this is one resolution that I am positive I could achieve. So there.
Well, that's a great way to start off the year, Steve, as you choose to violate all the traffic laws when you drive. Yeah. Okay, everybody. It's been great to start the new year with all of you. And thanks to everybody who watched on the Substack live stream. We have hit triple digits, I think, for the first time. And I hope we can
keep
it going.
It's great to see you.
We will be back next week. Thanks,
sometime.
everybody.
Right. Okay. Bye-bye.